Welcome to my American History Notes, where I discuss conclusions I've drawn from studying American history. You won't agree with my conclusions, maybe none of them, but you should at least know about the events and the people I discussed and the concepts. So, we're talking about the American Revolution, War for Independence. Um, Now, just following up from the last episode yesterday, Congress had a tough task. Most Americans did not want independence. Galloway suggested an American parliament parallel to the British with veto power over the older one. At the same time, the Suffolk Resolves were declared by towns around Boston and delivered to Philadelphia by Paul Revere, declaring Massachusetts a free state and ordering the citizens to arm themselves for a fight, which rendered Galloway's proposal sort of like debating insurance while your house is on fire, according to Morrison. So a Declaration of Rights was penned stating that Americans were entitled to all English liberties and addressing grievances of the past acts of Parliament. The Congress adjourned on October 26 and agreed to meet again on May 10th, 1775, if colonial grievances had not been addressed by England. This declaration took a long time to cross the Atlantic, allowing hotheads on both sides to cool down. Franklin in England suggested sending a royal commission to find out what could be done to prevent further trouble. The Earl of Chatham, William Pitt the Elder, in a very famous speech before Parliament, called for the withdrawal of British troops from Boston. The Duke of Richmond said that no one can be forced to submit to a government they will not accept. Edmund Burke delivered a speech on reconciliation with America. Lord North attempted to bribe Benjamin Franklin, who he had ousted as Postmaster General, to act as an intermediary. Franklin declared that unless the coercive acts were withdrawn, not even God Almighty could bring about reconciliation. After this blasphemous statement, and because of the attempt to settle everything by payoff and bribe, Franklin went from loyal Brit to American patriot. Lord North introduced another coercive bill called the New England Restraining Act on March 30th, 1775, which prevented the four New England colonies from trading with anyone but Great Britain and banning them from fishing off Newfoundland. This alone would have produced war had not other events transpired before news of this new law even reached the colonies. Daniel Boone and other pioneers had brought back stories of the great forests of the West, meaning West as in Kentucky. Governor Dunmore's war, mentioned previously, resulted in the Shawnee, abandoned by their fellow Indians, surrendering their rights to Kentucky. What disturbed these Western thinking pioneer colonists was that the Quebec Act brought the boundary of that province to the Ohio River, depriving the more southern colonies of the rich Ohio River land they so desperately wanted for speculation to make fortunes and for settlement to make lives. The Quebec Act also entitled the French in Quebec to keep the governing principles of the Roman Catholic Church intact. French Canadians rejected an offer to join the Continental Congress at Philadelphia because it was, of course, not, of course, in their best interest. The king and parliament wanted Scots, fur traders, controlled from Quebec over hunters like Daniel Boone involved in the Ohio Valley. In the meantime, fear of slave insurrection kept the citizens of the West Indies loyal to Britain, so the American colonies south of Canada and north of the West Indies were on their own, and the majority of people in those colonies didn't want to separate from England. But those who did were growing more and more determined every day. The province of Massachusetts Bay became virtually independent in October 1774 when the assembly dissolved by General Gage met at Concord as a provincial congress headed by John Hancock. This congress ignored General Gage, who was confined with his redcoats, or lobsterbacks as they were called, to Boston proper. It collected taxes, enforced laws, and collected arms, drilling militia to be prepared to fight when the British left Boston to try to enforce British rule. Why were they willing to fight? Well, there's an excerpt from an interview in 1845 with a 91-year-old veteran of the Revolutionary War, as reported by Morrison. The question was asked, did you take up arms against intolerable oppressions? Oppressions? I didn't feel them. Were you not oppressed by the Stamp Act? I never saw one of those stamps. I certainly never paid a penny for one of them. But what about then the tea tax? I never drank a drop of the stuff. The boys threw it all overboard. Then I suppose you've been reading Harrington or Sidney or Locke about the eternal principles of liberty. Never heard of them. We read only the Bible, the Catechism, Watts, Psalms, and hymns, and the Almanac. Well, then, what was the matter, and what did you mean in going to fight? Young man, what we meant in going for those redcoats was this: we had always governed ourselves, and we had always meant to. They didn't mean we should. Next, we're going to discuss additional things and some things that were said that are famous, that should be acknowledged and remembered about the buildup to the actual fighting in the War for Independence. So that's all, and thank you for watching.